I think we've got Rick Violette now.
Oh, very good. Yeah, let's go to Rick.
Rick Violette joins us, of course, the head of the New York Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association, and in wake of yesterday's meeting with management and with an assorted group of horsemen and other members of the NYTHA board. And Rick, obviously a spike in horses going wrong in any venue creates a certain amount of concern and consternation. When it's happening here in New York in the winter, it seems to get some added scrutiny.
Well, and not that it shouldn't. I mean, we've got to protect these horses, and when, whether they're avoidable or unavoidable, you better be paying attention to this stuff. So, it's not an acceptable level, and I think everybody is in agreement on that. And what is exactly the reason? I don't think we're going to find one switch and say, okay, fix that, and everything is hunky-dory. I think, once again, we have to continue to turn everything upside down. Nobody that trains over at the racetrack at Aqueduct, and I'm one of those, think it's the racetrack itself. I breezed 17 horses over it this morning, and they're all cooled out well and back in the stalls. Now there's also there's a difference between a track in the morning and the afternoon, and they've got to take a look at that. They're going to bring Mick Peterson back in to do all his instrument testing, moisture, the density. They'll bring in his ground penetrating radar and check the base and the sub base and see if there are frost heaves or there's an unevenness, below the naked eye. And they'll redo all of that stuff. That stuff has been done. It's, even though nobody really thinks that's the issue, you can't just go on that. You've got to re-examine everything. We've got to, ratchet up what the trainers are doing, and I don't think this is a time that trainers can be cavalier about anything. You've got to really look in the mirror and be very, very raise everybody's standard as to the horses in the condition you're going to lead them over. And this isn't time, like you said, to be cavalier about it. I think the jockeys have to be, very sensitive and aware of how the horses are warming up. And if there's a question mark, especially now, and maybe they're not supposed to run, take them over to the vet and save them for another day. The examining veterinarians have to ratchet. Everybody's got to jump in here and raise the standard. The stewards, I think, have to, take control of the racetrack in the afternoon. They have to hold the riders to a better standard, whether it's coming out of the gate or the herding late or on. Everybody that has that participates, the veterinarians, everybody's got to ratchet up thing, because what's happening isn't acceptable, and without knowing what the answer is, the medication standards have been changed and tightened up. Third-party administrator, LASIX, all the things that we have done that we had hoped would prevent something like this. Right now, we've got to make sure we're not missing something, and I think everybody is on board and doing that.
Rick, on the topic of the various protocols that were instituted as a result of the task force study and recommendations, since 2012, there has been a series of meets at all three New York venues that basically everyone from all levels of involvement have acknowledged that those protocols have improved the general atmosphere for safety and welfare. To some extent, isn't a spike no more than a spike? And unless there happens to be fissures that are discovered on the track that hadn't been heretofore noticed, some soft spots, which does happen. Isn't this more or less a scenario, at least at face value, that no matter how vigilant everybody is, there's going to be episodes and moments where there's going to be anomalies in these kinds of statistics?
There's no question about that. And we were having a terrific year until December. and the numbers were half of the national average. But it's not like a baseball player that's having a spike in strikeouts, and things will even out by the end of the year. We're talking about life and death as far as horses and riders potentially concerned. And just riding things out isn't acceptable. You have to. There's got to be a serious level of self-examination here. I mean, and if it's a spike, it's a spike, great. And if we actually tweak something in the process because of a crisis or the spike, and that we've improved the whole standard of anything within the industry, then that's a benefit from it. But it's not, like I said, just that, a pitcher losing 5 games in a row or a batter missing the baseball by 3 feet and hoping things will even out. This is much more serious stuff, and sometimes treating it as assuming that it's a spike without making sure that it's only a bad few weeks. That gets close to being cavalier and irresponsible. And if it's overkill, and probably a bad term, but if we're going over the top in being self-critical and forcing people to raise standards, and so be it. I don't know that the attempt to raise standards is ever over the top.
Rick, I just want to reiterate, because I think it's important to do so. After that task force put out the report, there were some changes made. And really, prior to this spike, when they went to Aqueduct, the numbers in New York were very good. In fact, compared nationally, they were right up at the top.
Well, I know, and you're right, and I thank you for that. And frankly, things were working. We went from a very bad spell to being the best in the country. It was half the national average. We had a terrific run, and it seemed that, changing the medication protocols, going to third-party administration of Lasix, heightening the reporting of corticosteroid injections, moving those further out from race day, all of those things, bringing in, a safety steward and bringing in, Dr. Palmer, all of those things seem to have had concrete results. And that's the frustration here, that those things were supposed to continue to work, and somehow we hit this bubble, and hopefully it's just a bubble or a spike. You can't assume it. You've got to go and reevaluate everything. It's just, and it's New York. It's New York. This happened in Albuquerque, and maybe it's something. It is a blip on the screen. It is in Albuquerque. It's not Louisiana. It's New York. And we don't have the latitude to assume that this will run its course and things will even out again. And hopefully that's what happens. But in the interim, we've got to make sure that the changes that we made are still in place, that the practices that were ramped up are still being run and being enforced. You have to do all of those things. Because we did make tremendous changes. The medication reform, and we've gone through this before, is significant. The raising the standards of the testing laboratories has been significant. There have been a lot of very, very good things that we went through a transformation period because of this crisis in 2012. And so there's no question there's a level of frustration. Okay, what happened? And I don't know that we'll ever be able to point the finger at one thing that happened, but you have to examine things as if you will find that one thing or two things that might make things stay safer.
Rick, there was one quote in Dave Grenig's piece on Friday that I find really troubling, and that is that the Gaming Commission wrote in their response to the situation, the Commission is extremely concerned with the unacceptable number of incidents at Aqueduct. Well, unacceptable meaning what? What's acceptable? If there were 2 a month, and if we were operating on the average of 2 per 1,000, which is industry-wide, is that acceptable? I mean, how bad, to me, of a precedent or of an atmosphere does this create when people want to put it in those terms? Because there's got to be some acceptance of the reality that horses go wrong, and are going to die. And if we're going to get into this arena that zero tolerance is the level that it has to be reached, we're in trouble as a sport because that's never going to happen.
Well, and that's a given, but the attempt, again, and it's semantics. I don't usually get upset about one-liners and quotes and everything. People have jobs to do, and there's a way they have to phrase things and whatnot. And it just, they're really, they're slices of time. Listen, the goal has to be zero fatalities. We know we're never going to get there. If you turn a bunch of horses out in the field, things happen. But again, you can't treat it as that's all we're doing. We're going to throw them out and let them fend for themselves. They're not fending for themselves. We're responsible for them. So, select quotes and words. Sometimes things come out differently. Word selections and all that. There are too many things for me to get upset about and worry about. We have long conversations with the same individuals. They're well-meant, intelligent people, and this is because in the they are unacceptable. If that trend were to continue, it's flat out way unacceptable. So it depends on what time frame you're looking at and everything. And and getting, I don't get exercise. I don't think it's fruitful sometimes getting exercise out of a quote or a sentence or whatever. Let's focus on everybody. We're all in this. We're already into the bus. We got to figure out how to get out from under and move forward. So we just take a deep breath and move on.
And that sounds like the game plan coming out of that meeting yesterday. You are moving forward. There will be some examination consultants brought in and whatnot, so we hope for the best there. But let's change the subject because it's that time of year. Before we let you go, a happier topic. It's 3-year-old season Derby Trail. Give us a little update on Upstart.
He's doing terrific. I'm trying to make the Holy Bull, and I'm on a razor-fine schedule. I've room for a couple more races, and things need to go extremely well for me to make the Holy Bull. I'd love to get a race in down there, and the Withers would probably be the backup. And while things kind of worked with Samrat, coming back and forth all winter, last winter, I'm not sure that I want to do that every year type of deal. So if I can make the Holy Bull and get first race in, that would be terrific. He's a really nice horse. We gave him 4 weeks off, and it shows. He matured a little bit, got a little thicker. He's loving what he's doing, and I think he's the real deal.
Very good. Rick, we absolutely appreciate the visit. We'll let you go. But again, hopefully things will move in the right direction down in New York. As I say, before things at Aqueduct, things were going very, very well down there. So we have a little bit of an aberration. You guys are going to address it as we saw through that meeting yesterday. But again, thanks for the visit and good